There's some dangerous, large carnivore out there.
And I saw that bird pick a young deer off the road and fly away.
And it was just about getting dark, and we started panicking, running down this ridge, not really having any clue what was throwing rocks in our vicinity, good-sized rocks. And I stopped long enough to get a 357 out of my backpack and look back, and that's when I saw it. I saw one.
For a week, the town of Defiance was being harassed by a werewolf. And it's actually attacked two railroad workers, killed livestock, just a lot of weird stuff that was going on.
Good evening, Monster Xers. I failed to unmute myself during the intro, so I will do the intro again. I was just practicing. Good Sunday evening. This is Gunnar Monson, your host of Monster X Radio and the founder of the Sasquatch Coffee Company. And you can find us at www.squatchcoffee.com. Sasquatch Coffee. Have you tried it, Yeti? With me, as always, is my good friend and co-host of Monster X Radio, Shane Hardcore Corson. Shane, how are you doing, buddy?
Yo, doing well, Gunnar. I thought maybe you had disappeared on me.
I stepped in a portal temporarily.
I'm glad you're back. Yeah, I'm glad you're back.
Scary experience. Horrifying experience. So.
Yeah. No. It's doing well.
So Shane and I this morning woke up in our research area. We went out, did a little squatching this weekend. We were joined Friday evening by our friend Larry Turner and Cindy Cadell. And then Shane brought his family up last night, and we hung out in our research area. Pretty quiet weekend for me. I know that we had some excitement Saturday morning when Larry was showing us one of the camp areas that one of our research partners had a sighting in last September, I believe it was. And he caught sight of something he described as bipedal walking along a trail very briefly. I did not see it. I was not looking in the same direction, of course. So something interesting. I went up there and looked around and did not find any evidence of anything, and I did not hear anything moving, or so. It was, but of course, always interesting, inconclusive, but interesting. So, good weekend. Did you? I guess with all the excitement, of course, I woke up to a flat tire this morning, and did you hear anything last night? I know you did some therming of the area.
Beautiful weather, great time to be out. in the Pacific Northwest. Amazing weather. Overall, no, quiet weekend. Really quiet weekend. Didn't really find anything of interest. Didn't have anything really occur, but had a great weekend out with you guys, and did some hiking and therming and the usual. But overall, quiet weekend, and nothing to bring back home other than we had a great time as we always do. So. But there's much to be taken from those times out in the field when nothing happens. You take note of that stuff, and it happens more times than not.
I was just going to touch on that.
That's okay.
Yeah, more. I think people think that going out and doing Bigfoot research is always something always happens, and that, like you were saying, more often than not, you get skunked. And but we did have an interesting incident yesterday morning, but for the most part it was very quiet. So our guest, I'm going to introduce our guest today. For anybody who's into Bigfooting and is a fan of the show Finding Bigfoot on Animal Planet, he needs no introduction. Cliff Barackman is a resident of Portland, Oregon, and one of the co-hosts of the show on Animal Planet, Finding Bigfoot, which they are just started up a new season. We're excited to talk to Cliff and find out what's up with him on the show and his own research. So without further ado, I'm going to bring our guest on. Good evening, Mr. Barackman. How are you?
Hi, gentlemen. I'm doing great, thank you. And also, thanks for inviting me on.
Oh, you bet. Thanks for joining us. With me is Shane.
Yep.
Say hi, Shane.
How you? Yeah. Hello, Cliff. How you doing?
Doing all right, Shane.
Well, glad to have you here, Cliff. I was going to get right to some questions. Specifically, exciting times for you. You got this new season, Finding Bigfoot, that just aired last Thursday. Can you talk a little bit about the Finding Bigfoot show and some of the places that you're going to in this particular season?
Yeah. Well, the season premiere was on Thursday, and we hit the Mount Shasta area for that. We invited a team of paranormal folks who think Bigfoots are a lot weirder than, say, I do, out with us, and, thinking that, okay, well, so many Bigfooters out there entertain those thoughts that Sasquatches are supernatural or paranormal or something weird, right? I don't personally ascribe to that. I think there might be other explanations for those weird things that themselves are weird, of course, but maybe Bigfoots have nothing to do with it. But still, we thought that enough of our brethren in Bigfoot land go that direction, that it's about time we do an episode featuring some of those ideas. And that was around Mount Shasta. And I'll tell you, Shasta is super squatchy, but what a lot of people don't realize is that some of those places that we went around the Mount Shasta area are very historically significant. For example, if you saw the episode, I believe it was the First Night Investigation, where I was at with Matt and Renee was at with RPG. Maybe it's the second one. I don't remember. But anyway, at that location, we were at Basin Gulch. And if you've been in Bigfoot land for more than a few years, you probably know Basin Gulch was the haunting grounds for the Bay Area group. George Haas, Archie Buckley, and like that whole gang. The probably the single most pioneering early group of Bigfooters ever. And that was where they went. And, of course, Bigfoots are still there. I've had action at Basin Gulch as well and in the surrounding area. The area has been red hot for 50-something years now. So that's actually where we saw that mountain lion. We didn't get anything else that night, but, man, it was awfully cold, I'll tell you. So that alone to me would be, for a Bigfoot nerd like myself, that would be enough for me to tune in and say, Basin Gulch, I want to see what happened there. Of course, it wasn't featured prominently on the show because the vast majority of Bigfooters nowadays are kind of new. And they don't know who the Bay Area group is, or was, I guess, because we're no longer a group. In fact, I think most of the major members are now dead, unfortunately. But yeah, so that to me is enough reason to tune in. But then again, I'm like an ultra Bigfoot nerd. But for the rest of the season, we mostly goof around in the South because we were filming during the winter time, and the South is at least accessible during the winter as opposed to the Northeast or wherever else. So most of our episodes are Mississippi and North Carolina and Arkansas. However, I believe, I could be wrong because I didn't see the promo, but I believe next week we're in South Central Oregon. Once again, Oregon has drawn us back, lured us back with its squatchy allure. But this time we were personally invited by the Klamath Indians to go Bigfooting on their reservation. On the east side of the Cascade Mountains, south of Bend, right outside Klamath Falls. And I was interested in that because I've never gone Bigfooting on the east side of the Cascades, at least not that far east, and certainly not that far south. And almost no information comes out of there. But sure enough, once we got on the reservation and started talking to the locals, like the Bigfoot reports were just dripping off the walls. There were so many of them. We spoke to excellent, fantastic, very experienced witnesses who had seen them with their own eyes, good daylight sightings, maybe 5-6 times, and I have absolutely no reason to doubt them. The stuff they were saying is spot on, stuff that you probably would only know about if you had been around them a bunch. And, of course, the locations are off the grid, basically. No one's allowed in there unless you're a tribes member. So we were escorted there by the tribes folk and given blessings and knowledge and access to their land. And I can't say how accommodating the entire the whole area was, not only on the res, but also off the res as well. We're all blown away by the kindness and welcoming attitude of the locals down there, man. It was just awesome.
Mm. Oh, fantastic. You know, you've had the fortunate, you've been very fortunate, Cliff, by talking to a lot of Native Americans and being invited to different places by Native Americans, you know, to look into and talk to the elders about the subject of Sasquatch. You know, Mount Shasta, fantastic area, and you're originally from California. Mount Shasta ever on your radar, before Finding Bigfoot?
Oh, of course. In fact, I've spent quite a few nights out there. Bobo and I were Bigfooting once, and actually on his birthday, which is coming up April 15th. Tax Day, ironically enough, is Bobo's birthday. I remember back in maybe 2006 or 7 or something, we were just west of the Shasta area, not too far, at least a place called Scotts Valley, if I remember right. We ran into him there. I've done work with both Matt and Bobo outside of Dunsmuir. I've gone Bigfooting myself just north of Shasta and also on Shasta itself. I've been to Shasta, either the mountain itself or the general area probably 4, 5, 6 times or more before I returned there. Although all that stuff was back in the 2000s, early 2000s. I had not been there, I don't think, since 2008 or something like that. So it was a nice return.
Fantastic. You know, the one of the other areas down there that I'm from California myself. Before I moved up here, I moved up here in 2008. One of the other areas down in California that I was always interested was Yosemite. I liked San Bernardino, some of the outlying areas. When you lived in California, and you've been at this for 20 plus years, what other areas in California specifically, I mean, besides maybe some of the more obvious ones, were you interested in or you've taken reports from that you found compelling?
Oh, well, outside the most obvious areas, probably the first thing that jumps to my mind is Los Angeles County, which nobody thinks of as Bigfoot country. But sure enough, I saw a footprint in the ground there myself, led there by a witness, a 15-inch footprint. I think it was on I have to check my notes, but I believe it was on the east fork of the San Gabriel River up in the Angeles National Forest. They do cruise through there every once in a while. They are fairly rare down there. I think they're just passing through for the most part. But the Los Angeles County and even down in the Orange County, there's a smattering of reports all the way down there. Bobo knows, I believe there's an Indian reservation just east of, well, pretty far east of San Diego, but between there and like the Salton Sea area that has stuff going on. I was just speaking to one of the best researchers I know, a guy named Matt Pruitt. I was just talking to him the other day, and he was detailing how he was speaking to a witness in that same general area that seemed to have a number of he was a long-term witness who had seen them for about 10 or 15 years, and all that activity has died down now, but all that stuff was in San Diego County as well. I've never actually gone Bigfooting in San Diego, but I have gone Bigfooting in Los Angeles, the area, like the Angeles Crest area. One spot I've always wanted to go check out is Crystal Lake. A lot of stuff used to come out of there. I don't know if it still does or not. Gorman off the 5 near the Grapevine. There's a lot of great reports as well. Excellent witnesses, land surveyors seeing these things, hunting boar and stuff. I've taken footprint reports on the Ventura, Los Angeles County line. And then to see what I think is going on is that the Sasquatches in the Sierra Nevada mountains, particularly in the southern Sierras, the Golden Trout Wilderness and that general area, the Kern River, I think they sometimes, for whatever reason, probably mostly in winter, swoop down and cruise through the Tehachapi Mountains, which connects to the Los Angeles area mountains. And from there, from the mountains outside Los Angeles, it's basically a straight shoot all the way up to Big Sur. Now, we know there's Sasquatches in Big Sur. There's amazing witnesses up there, good researchers in the general area, in the Bay Area as well, that follow up on these things. So how would they get there? Well, they probably aren't crossing the valley floor, the Central Valley. They're probably moving through the mountain ranges. And when you think about it, once you get about 10, 15 miles from the coast all the way up and down California, there's a lot of nothing. And Sasquatches don't really need that heavily forested mountain range like everybody thinks they do. I've been to a lot of places in the past 5 years in particular on the show that show me that what most people think about Sasquatches is kind of just incorrect. Now, so these like kind of barren hills and stuff, they would be happy to cruise over those barren hills and whatnot and then duck down into those river valleys during the day. If they only travel over the open space at night, they've got the whole area to themselves, and no one really lives out there to see them, or at least so few people are out there to see them that they'd almost never be reported, which seems to be the case. But gosh, I mean, as far as places I've gone Bigfooting down there and whatnot, I could just dominate the rest of the show on that alone. So instead of dwelling on one question, like, let's go. Whatever else you guys want to know.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say the Tehachapi area is pretty interesting to me. I used to do a lot of work out there by Edwards Air Force Base, Hesperia. You got the Antelope Valley there. It's real deserty, but you got these huge mountains, like Tehachapi's on a mountain, and you got these. There actually are a lot of forested areas up there, and you get a lot of snow. Truly a fascinating area with a lot of reports that a lot of people don't know about or are not aware of. And I figured, you being in California and researching, you would be on top of a lot of those.
Oh, yeah, they're a lot closer to home than anybody thinks. It's kind of, I've always compared it to like fishing or something, like surf fishing, for example. Most surf fishermen go up to the ocean and they cast way out there as far as they can. Well, they're casting past the fish, man. The fish are practically at their feet. And the same thing's true with Bigfoot. You don't have to go, you don't have to drive 6 hours and then hike 4 more into the middle of the wilderness area to find them. They're right at the edge of civilization. You just got to know where to look. And wherever you look, it turns out you can find the same patterns there. Like you mentioned Antelope Valley, right? Down there in Southern California. The Antelope Valley back in the 1970s had a rash of Sasquatch sightings, and everybody kind of wrote it off saying, oh, it's kind of deserty, it's kind of this and that. Oh, it's Southern California, they would never be down there. Well, it's nonsense. If you look at why they were there and what the situation was there, then you see. Back in the 70s, the Antelope Valley was like covered in this like 6 or 7 foot tall high grass. So you can't see over the stuff. And what happens in the grass is that rabbits live in the grass, and they had a population boom, like a serious problematic population boom. And you can look this up, it was in the news in the 70s. Well, it turns out that the Sasquatches moved in to take advantage of that. One of the patterns that we see again and again is that wherever there is too much of a certain kind of food item, very often Sasquatches are seen in that type of area, whether in this case happened to be rabbits. Rabbits were coming out of everybody's ears down there. So the Bigfoots moved in to kind of help cull the population. Same thing happened in Pacific City on the Oregon coast a number of years back. I spoke to one botanist in the Sierras. He saw this big one walking around and scared him, and he went away. And I said, well, did you notice like too many deer or too many, something else in the area? And he goes, well, you know what? There were more brook trout than I've ever seen in my last 30 years of working in the Sierras. And they're all 6 to 8 inches long, kind of too small for the anglers to really take notice of. But they were so thick you could practically walk across them on the river. I said, oh, there you go. Yeah, wherever there's too much of one kind of food, the Bigfoots will eventually find them, as will the coyotes and the mountain lions and the bobcats and everything else that has to eat,
Well, that's one of the questions that people ask is how does a population of an animal this large, sustain itself? And I'm like, well, first of all, how does a bear sustain itself? They eat the same kind of things. So I'd like to dig down a little bit. You were saying there's a lot of misconceptions that you've learned about that people hold about Sasquatch during your time on Finding Bigfoot. What are some of the other misconceptions?
Oh, well, the terrain's the big one. If you go to someplace like the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, it's like some of the least likely habitat you'd ever run across for Sasquatches. But sure enough, they're there. They're guaranteed they're there. We ran into one there. I mean, I not only are the stories indicative of their presence, but I myself still doesn't have a good explanation for what we ran into that night. Because you go to the Pine Ridge Reservation, it kind of looks like a rolling flat Kansas and stuff like that. But there's these deep arroyos, these deep, often dry riverbeds that are bushy and nasty and thick and pokey and just nasty places to hang out. And that's where the Bigfoots hang out. They love that stuff. There's no accounting for taste, right? But they're usually seen crossing the flat plain areas at night. That's where they come out of their safe hidey holes and they walk the 2 or 3 miles to the next river basin or whatever, and that's when they're usually seen. And they forage along the way, very often in like trash cans in Native Americans' backyards and stuff like that, or picking up a stray cat here and there, or whatever else they find. I think a big part of their diet is actually rodents, of all things. We always harp on the deer angle on the show. And the Sasquatches hunt deer. Actually, I mentioned the Bay Area group earlier in the show at Basin Gulch and stuff. That's one of their pioneering discoveries, as far as I'm concerned. Archie Buckley specifically, is the first guy that I'm aware of to really publish the connection between Sasquatches and deer. But these Sasquatches on the Pine Ridge Reservation, they're few and far between, just like everywhere else. But they're living in the thick, nasty stuff and going across these desert-like plains. They've even been seen down in the Badlands area, which is like the last place you'd expect them. But if the season is right, the water is right, and the temperature and food items are present, that they are looking for, they are going to be there. Another big misconception I'm finding is that people think that Sasquatches are the most reclusive animal and they don't want anything to do with human. And you can even hear Renee say stuff like that in the show. She brings up, like, I don't see why an animal that's trying to remain hidden would expose itself, blah, 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 blah. Right? You've heard the argument before if you've seen the show. Well, there's no reason to think whatsoever that Sasquatches are any more reclusive than anything else. Because if you look at the habits of pretty much most of the big animals, like bull elk, for example, or bear, or mountain lions and stuff, they all kind of mirror average Bigfoot behavior, in my opinion. Bigfoots might be better at hiding. Bigfoots might be better at a lot of things than these other animals. But they don't seem to show any greater amount of apprehension to humans than these other animals do. I don't know, you guys are in the woods a lot. It's usually the hind end of it as it's running away. Well, that's the same thing as Sasquatch, right? And sometimes they stand there and look at you for a few seconds and then do so. So it's not that why would an animal who's so elusive show itself? Well, it's because that's what all animals do. If you're familiar with large animal behavior in general, then the behavior of the Sasquatch does not stand out as anything totally different. So off the top of my head, there's 2 stereotypes of Sasquatches that I don't think fit the bill. But that is so often the case with stereotypes of anything. Yeah, that's just animals, people, you name it. They just don't seem to fit the bill.
Yeah, it's so unfair to, profile Sasquatch.
Yeah, and I'm totally against Sasquatch profiling. Yeah. I think my voting record shows that.
And that doesn't even speak to, their level of intelligence versus other animals in the forest. They may just have a more curious nature as opposed to, they may not just be driven by the need to eat and procreate and drink water. They may have some curiosity.
Oh, yeah, I think it's clear that they do. Very clear that they do. They spend a lot of time looking at people that they could have done something different with their time except for looking. Maybe it's a paranoia thing, like I'm going to check you out to make sure you're no harm. Maybe it's there's nothing else to do here thing, so I'm going to watch it for a while. But it seems to me, and again, I could be wrong. I could be wrong about everything I'm saying, really, because there are no experts on Bigfoot. I mean, I just happen to have a lot of experience is all. So I've come to my own conclusions and hypotheses, you know. But it very well could be that Sasquatches don't have a whole lot of problem finding food. And that's why they can spend the time watching people camp or do things. Or maybe they're just paranoid, making sure that they aren't, you know, taking their deer. Some people have put that hypothesis out there, that Sasquatches are kind of possessive about their deer herds, you know, and they want to make sure that we're not going to cull it and whatnot. Yeah, but certainly their intelligence, I think, is probably going to be their downfall eventually. I think that's how most of the good pieces of footage were gotten, either stumbling upon them blindly on accident, like the Patterson-Gimlin film, or having one follow you around for a while during the night, and then eventually somehow catching it on thermal, you know, like the Stacey Brown footage. Eventually someone will get more footage, probably capitalizing on their curiosity. I think it's their largest weakness that Bigfooters who are looking to film one can exploit.
And that's what you and I have talked about that a little bit, is that you really aren't interested in proving they exist, or you don't feel the need to prove they exist. You already are of the opinion that they do. Correct?
Yeah. I've got no dog in the fight, so to speak. You know, it won't further my scientific career if they're proven or not. I'm confident they exist, and I don't see why I need to prove it to anybody else, because I kind of don't care what other people think. You know, if there's an old saying, like, if you're right about something, you don't need to prove it, you know, because the truth can withstand the scrutiny, so to speak, you know. And also, more importantly for me, at this point in the game, and some people disagree with me, but I'm right on this one. At this point in the game, to prove a species, you need a holotype. You need a type specimen to describe in a scientific paper under the scrutiny of other scientists. And that means a dead one, because you aren't going to be able to capture one of these things. I suppose you could. I mean, there's Jocko in the 1888 or whatever that was. That, you know, I guess it's possible that you could try to capture one. But as Dr. Grover Krantz pointed out, and he was a strong advocate of killing one of these things for the purpose of science, the fastest, easiest, cleanest way to do so is with a bullet. I don't advocate that. I think it shows a lack of respect and a lack of compassion towards the individuals that these Sasquatches are. They're not like you know, herring or something like that, where there's tens of millions of them and they're all more or less the same. They're a great ape species, just like we are, or very similar to what we are, but also very similar to what the other apes are. That means they're individuals, and they have their moods, and they have their personalities, and they have their interests, and they have, you know, things they like and don't like. They are individuals, and that's something that gets lost, I think, with Bigfooters as well. They just group them into Bigfoots. Bigfoots do this, Bigfoots do that. Well, you can't say that, because, like I said, they're individuals. They're rare. They're intelligent. They're self-aware, which I think is even more important. And something like that, an animal of that caliber, deserves to not be killed for the sake of our curiosity, which is kind of what it comes down to. It's our curiosity that makes us think that we are masters of the planet and we can go killing other things just so we know more about them. Well, I think
I told you they exist. Yeah, right. I agree with you too. And the argument, people that are pro-kill make the argument that we need to kill them to protect their habitat. And my counter to that is there's plenty of known animals that we should be protecting the same habitat for already. We don't need to kill a rare species, a specimen of a rare species, to protect the habitat when we should already be being good stewards of the planet. So I find that as kind of a poor argument.
Well, we are clearly the most foolish monkey on the planet, because we're pooping in the jacuzzi and we're sitting in it right now. I mean, we're destroying our own habitat. So who the heck's going to want to protect the Sasquatch habitat when we're destroying the air we breathe? It's just ridiculous. We're polluting the water we drink and polluting the air we breathe. Do you think a species like that, like us, can do anything? I don't. I think it's ridiculous. And honestly, the people who say we need to kill one to protect one and whatever else, and that's all fine and good. I'm glad your heart's in the right space, and I guess there's a certain angle that I can understand that. But you know what? The Bigfoots are doing an awfully good job protecting themselves at this point. That's the bottom line. The best thing we can do for them is to leave them alone and then protect the land that they live on already. And luckily, they've been kind of pushed out of all the great areas. You know, today they live in some areas that aren't that great, you know, for the most part. So we can protect those lands now for other reasons than the fact that potentially our closest living relative, as far as species goes, shares that habitat with us. We don't need them to be real to protect that habitat. So I don't find that as a very compelling argument. And, you know, and again, one will eventually die for the sake of the others. It's going to happen. The species is, in fact, real. Some logger is going to roll one down when he's not paying attention or something, or, you know, some testosterone-driven hunter is going to put a bullet in one's head or something to prove something to somebody, you know, for some, you know, something to happen to them in their past that they have to prove this stuff to somebody, whatever. Or some good, well-meaning scientist is going to bring one down. And I can see a scientist trying to do it because they're stuck in the scientific dogmatic way of thinking that we have to kill these things to prove them. But eventually, one will be brought in. So what I see my role for right now, at least, is I'm out there advocating compassion for these things, you know, respect, and let's learn about them because they're cool, and let's try to protect their land. You know, conservation before discovery is what I call that. Let's protect their land now, so they'll have places when they're proven and stuff. Because they don't need our protection yet. They're doing really good by themselves. But as soon as the dead one is brought in, and they're real, and all the news guys are saying, oh my gosh, these clowns on Finding Bigfoot were right, or whatever, you know, whatever's going on. That's when they need our protection. That's when they need our protection. Because the human species has like the Midas touch. But instead of everything we touch turning to gold, it turns to crap. And as soon as we touch them, that's when they're in danger. So if I can get everybody on board now to love Bigfoots and show compassion for them and be excited about the species and learning about them, you know, that's going to serve them better. That's going to serve Sasquatches better when they're discovered, to have an army of weirdos behind them, just advocating for their protection and to leave them alone and stuff. Like that's when we're going to be useful. They don't need us now, but afterwards they're going to need us.
So let's talk a little bit about the show. I'm sure everybody would like to know, is there plans for, after this season, is there plans for another season?
Yeah, there's some tentative plans right now to go back on the road. We don't have locations planned or anything like that, but it looks like we're going out for another run. And of course, that's thanks to all of our viewers, because without you guys watching it, the show cannot go on. I'm surprised it's gone on this long, but I'm very, very thankful that it has. Mostly for the experience that it's offered to me. And yeah, traveling's okay. You know, I'd kind of rather be at home sometimes, but meeting the people, meeting the witnesses, going to great Bigfoot habitat in so many of the states and other continents as well has been just amazing. But it looks like we're going out for another one at this point. And thanks to everybody for watching. And you know, our biggest demographic is, I think, probably young people and weird middle-aged people like myself, and you guys too. I know you well, so you're in there as well. But yeah, a lot of people love the show, and a special shout out to the people who hate the show, because you guys seem to be more passionate about it than anyone else. Based on my Twitter and Facebook and all the hate and aggression and violence and homophobia and stuff that comes through to my Facebook and whatnot, you guys are by far the most passionate of all the viewers, and I don't know what you're doing watching it, but keep on watching it and keep on hating us because you're helping us stay on the air. So thank you very much to all the people who despise the show. You probably do more help to us than almost anyone else. There's a good up yours to all you haters out there.
Perfect.
It is. I mean, it's funny because people it's a TV show first, and it is. And I've talked to all the cast members except Renee about the process. It's made for TV. It isn't exactly what it's the closest thing to real Bigfoot research that I've ever seen on TV. But it is made, it's edited for TV to be entertaining. And why don't they do this? They should go do this. Go start your own Bigfoot show. The argument that it's detrimental because people are out howling in the woods now, or knocking on trees, or replicating things that they see on Finding Bigfoot. As a researcher, I think it actually ups our obligation to be better researchers, because there is that possibility that what you're recording, what you're experiencing could. I mean, I always picture this cartoon of one group of researchers on one side of the hill recording another group of researchers on another side of the hill, and they're, listen to, and that I'm sure that has got to have happened at some time. But
well, we've been hoaxed before, and I know that whenever you go bigfooting in some place like Salt Fork State Park in Ohio, you always have to be on guard because so many Bigfooters go to places like that. You always have to be on guard, basically. Sometimes if you find a good spot way off the beaten path and stuff that they seem to be around, you can kind of relax a little bit about that. And of course, you guys are out in the woods a lot. You have a pretty good idea where you are, the roads that go in, the nearest campgrounds, or even people camping outside of the campgrounds. The first thing I do when I get to a spot is I drive all the roads I can to see if anyone else is around. And then I err on usually the only road in, just to make sure that sort of thing isn't happening. But as far as the show being detrimental, I had some concerns at first that perhaps it was a little weird and disrespectful. Later on, I had concerns that maybe the Sasquatches were going to be more difficult for people like us to encounter because they're going to catch on to our tricks. And I still think that Sasquatches, that they're no dummies. I've been in the areas that we've blown out. They just don't respond anymore. So the Bigfoot's catching on to our tricks is going to be better for them in the long run. So good. I mean, too bad for us, but good for them. Because I do this because I enjoy it. I enjoy this, and I want them to be well. I want Sasquatches to thrive. I don't mind bothering them a bit and knocking on their door and screaming in their ear a bit because I enjoy that sort of stuff, and I think it's cool when they do that back. But, I'm kind of in this for them at this point now, and me, because I just love spending time in the woods. I just got back from 2 nights in the woods. Like, I was out until about 2 hours ago. Nothing really happened or whatever, but I was out with Guy Edwards and Craig Flippy and just going out and, beating on trees and hanging out and stuff for a little while. It's just good for the soul to get out, and I think that's the point. And if nothing else, our show has gotten a lot of people, and probably largely kids, off the couch, got that Xbox controller out of their hand, and got minds and bodies out into the woods. And that itself is a good thing. And
I agree, because this weekend, my significant other, Susan, and her son, Jake, went with us, as Shane had his young daughter and his wife with him this weekend. And to me, Finding Bigfoot is kind of this generation's In Search Of, specifically geared for Bigfoot. So, yeah. So,
it totally is, and that responsibility is not lost upon me. In fact, it's a heavy, heavy weight. It's one of the things that I wear around my neck that constantly reminds me that the show has to be of good quality, and it has to be real. And we're not going to lie about stuff. We're going to do the best we can to show you what it's really like, and that whole comparison to the In Search Of thing, because it's because of In Search Of and those shows that I'm doing this today. So there's another Cliff Barackman out there somewhere watching the show right now. I don't know who he is or who she is, but he or she is out there watching the show and loving it every single week. And another 30 or 40 years, they could be a primatologist. They could be one of the first primatologists to study Sasquatches specifically. I mean, who knows what influence any of us have But I do know that I'm influencing an entire new generation. Not me, of course, alone, but the show is influencing an entire new generation of Bigfooters and people who love Bigfoot. And again, that's why I'm doing this. I want people to love Bigfoot.
Well, for me too, I think one of the other services that Finding Bigfoot has actually provided to the community, people at large and witnesses, is allowed them to come forward and share their encounters, where prior to that, because it's brought the subject into the consciousness of the public. You know, one of the things when I talk to witnesses that have never told anybody their stories before, one of the initial things, well, I didn't know. Who do you tell when you have this experience? And I think that one of the services that Finding Bigfoot has provided is allowed witnesses to feel comfortable talking about their encounters.
Yeah, I hear that everywhere I go all throughout the country, is that people thought that they were alone, or they heard about Bigfoot, but they weren't willing to share until they saw other people standing up on our show and sharing their experiences, right? That is definitely something, kind of an unforeseen service that I guess the show has resulted in, because I didn't really see that one coming, but I should have. I mean, looking back, it's obvious. But that just wasn't on my radar, But yeah, we hear that again. Like they would have never shared anything if it wasn't for the show, because who do you tell? I mean, because you go online and you look up anybody, you look up any of the Bigfoot groups, you don't know if they're weirdos or if they're dangerous people who are going to hound you, or you don't know what they're going to. Because going out blindly like that is kind of tough. But at least on Finding Bigfoot, if they're watching the show, they basically invite the four of us into their living room every week. Every Sunday night, it's a family affair. They hang out with the kids or whatever, the family, the wife, the cat, the dog, whoever, and watch the show. So they kind of have a relationship with us in a way. So if that lowers somebody's, that lowers their firewall a bit, and they feel a little bit more willing to share it with us because they kind of know how we're going to react, because they kind of know us a little bit as individuals. It's a lot easier, I think, for someone to share a story like that with us than it would be to share it with some anonymous person on the other end of a phone line. That's a little scary in some ways. And even if it's not us, and they do want to share it with another group or something like that, Olympic Project, BFRO, whoever, at least they know they're not alone. There's thousands of people who are seeing these things, thousands of them. People say, well, how come if Bigfoots are real, how come people don't see them more? So, well, how come you're not aware of how many people see them is a better question. A lot of people see these things all the time, man. And it's so good for them to know that they're not alone. They're not crazy. They're not anything, all that actually exceptional. They just got lucky. It's just like seeing a bear, but a lot cooler and a lot more rare. So I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah. You ever feel yourself taking the place of a psychiatrist or somebody, at least a shoulder to lean on?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that once you speak to a witness, and then especially the kind that man, this has been weighing on me heavily for 30 years, or one of those witnesses. It's kind of strange in a way, because as soon as you make that connection with them, you're kind of like friends. You're an important confidant to them for the rest of their lives. When they see Bigfoot stuff, or when they have something weird happen in their backyard or something, if they live in the right habitat, they'll let you know. They'll call you back or email you back, said, hey, this is me. I spoke to you 6 years ago. You probably don't remember, but blah, 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 blah. And tell me about another report, And you guys are Bigfoot researchers. You talk to witnesses. I mean, that a special bond exists between the researcher and the witness. Maybe not always, but as far as I'm concerned, because I understand that these people are sticking their neck out. A lot of these people are pretty concerned about what happened to them, and it's kind of shook their cage really well. A special bond is there, and that's also why that I don't publish sighting reports. I have hundreds of them on my website, but they're all backstage. They're all stuff that I read. I don't publish them for anybody else. And even if I do publish them in some weird situation, like a blog post or something like that, I keep all witnesses 100% anonymous. Even if they want to be known, I keep it anonymous, out of respect for the witnesses that I speak to, and also just, to cut down on people trying to get attention and all that sort of stuff too. So, I mean, the focus should be on Bigfoots, not the witnesses. But when witnesses come to me, their privacy, their anonymity, and my respect for the witnesses is tantamount. I mean, it's very, very important to me, and because of that relationship that you have, when somebody trusts you enough to give you a report and to share something kind of scary that happened to them, I want to reciprocate with some respect.
And that's a great approach, because I have people that have, one of the concerns that I've had with witnesses that I've brought up is like, all right, who are you going to share this report with? And to me, the experience always belongs to the witness. That I always am honored that they felt comfortable sharing their encounter. I'm just a conduit. It's like I'm glad that I'm here, that you're able to share your experience, and it's always cool for me. One of my favorite things is talking to people that have had encounters. That's one of the very cool things about being involved in Bigfoot research, and having people know that you are into it, opens the door for. I don't know how many people have approached me just because they know that I make no secret about the fact that I like to go look for Bigfoot. So.
Oh yeah, especially up here in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, I've started referring to Sasquatches as pretty much the I guess the best kept secret of the Pacific Northwest. It's because nobody's telling anybody about what they saw that one day. But sure enough, you talk to 5 or 6 people, and somebody in there's probably seen one up here, or at least their uncle did, or their dad did, or their mom saw one on the way to work, or whatever. You talk to just a few people out here in Portland or Seattle or anywhere in between, and sure enough, you're going to run across witnesses and you're going to run across stories, but no one's talking about it unless you go, pry it out of them by saying, yeah, Bigfoot's real. I know about that, and then say, oh, have you seen something? And pretty soon they'll tell you. Sasquatches are the Pacific Northwest. Actually, it's North America. It's not even the Pacific Northwest. I mean, you go to Bigfoot country anywhere, Trimble County in Kentucky or something, Whitehall, New York, anywhere like that. It's like the best kept secret in the neighborhood. No one's talking about it because everyone's kind of embarrassed they saw one, but you talk about it for very long and you're going to find somebody. So
that kind of makes Bigfoot the Kevin Bacon of cryptozoology.
Oh yeah, I totally think there's 5 degrees to Sasquatch, or probably even 3. Yeah, it depends where you are. In Portland, I'm asking people all the time. Yeah, I'm asking people all the time in Portland, and about 1 out of 5 say yes on average. But other places, like Lake Quinault, it's 100% of the people know somebody who say they saw one or saw one themselves. So it's like 1 to 5 degrees of Bigfoot.
I think that's a game for hopsquatch. We should be playing 5 degrees of
yeah.
Of course, you can't do it in that room because it's you can't. You're gonna. Everybody's either knows somebody or has had an encounter themselves. So.
Oh yeah, and I can't do that amongst my friends either. So very few. It's harder to find a friend of mine who isn't into the Sasquatch thing.
So a while back, you and Craig Flippy put out a DVD, Bigfoot Road Trip. Hilarious. It was fun to see that side of you and your sense of humor and the Bigfoot opposite. But besides being having a lot of humor, it also had a lot of good content, Bigfoot content. Is there? And if you haven't, by the way, if any of the audience, anybody listening has not watched Cliff's Bigfoot Road Trip DVD, I highly suggest that you go get it and watch it tonight. Is there, I've heard rumors, and I'm hopefully waiting for Bigfoot Road Trip 2. Is there such a thing in the plan?
Yeah. There is. It's been stalled and delayed, though, for the most part. I would say it's about 75% filmed. I already know the segments that are going to be in it. So the complications tend to be my time on the road, because I spend about 7 or 8 months a year on the road. And, after I get, this past season, the one that's being shot now, I started filming that in first half of November. And I basically finished, the first week of March, I believe. Maybe the last couple of days of February, but I think it was the first week of March. So I just got home about 5-6 weeks, and a lot of other things have been eating away at my time. because, life goes on, whether you're trying to edit together Bigfoot Road Trip 2 or not. So my biggest thing right now is time. I've had a distinct lack of time combined with a distinct lack of motivation once I get off the road to get anything done. Obviously, the first 3 or 4 weeks, I don't really want to do much anything. I mean, this past weekend was the first time I even spent the night in the woods since I was home. I've been out in the woods a few times and talked to witnesses and all this other stuff, but so I'm just now starting to feel the groove again. Get back in the groove a bit. So that's part of it, and also Craig Flippy has taken up another project. He's filming his own documentary, not necessarily about Sasquatches, although Bigfoot plays a role in it. More of a journey of self-discovery combined with mopeding and a moped trip combined with ninja skills and Bigfoot and weirdos of all sorts and flavors. His thing is called Crappy Little Dreams, kind of following his own path in life. So he's kind of taken more time to do that, as well he should. So between our two distracted personalities, it's been kind of slow going on the editing front for Bigfoot Road Trip 2. However, we do have some great segments filmed, and it will come out eventually, I guarantee it, because I'm sitting on all this amazing stuff. Craig and I go to Ape Canyon to look for the cabin, and then fail to find the cabin. Spoiler alert! But then we find the guy who did. And so we go back and have a little bit of home footage from that, the actual cabin site. I think that'll probably be the first time any of that's ever been shown anywhere. I do a very long interview and cut it down to about 20 minutes with John Crew, son of Jerry Crew. And, of course, all Bigfooters should have a photograph of Jerry Crew in their house. Jerry Crew is a guy in 1958 who cast the first known Bigfoot footprint that made it to the newspaper to have pictures taken of it that went out on the AP wire that gave the word Bigfoot to the English language. Before that, the word Sasquatch was known from Canada from the 1920s by a guy named J.W. Burns from the Stahelas people, Native American, they're First Nation people because they're Canadian. They're a reserve. That's what they call reservations up in Canada. But Jerry Crew is the guy who named Bigfoot, which is also a huge misconception. People think it was the guy who wrote the article, Joe something, I believe, an Italian name. I can't remember his last name. But anyway, it starts with a G, if I remember right. But if you look at that guy, he gets credit for naming Bigfoot, but he did not. Jerry Crew did with his road building crew. And but I interviewed John Crew because his importance is, number one, he still has the original 1958 cast. And I had been looking for the cast for 15 years probably. Dr. Meldrum had no idea where the cast was. He and I were both working in cahoots trying to find this thing. And sure enough, it surfaced. And it turns out it was miles from where I live. So I cornered John and had him show me the cast, and I talked to him about his experiences because when he was 7 years old, his dad brought him down to the road building site and showed him those footprints in the ground before they cast them. Now, that's huge. That is an eyewitness to history right there. They went down on a Saturday when John was off of school. And also in this interview, John talks a great deal about how his father, Jerry, was trying to find another Bigfoot. He would do things like he would grade the road that they were building back 600 yards and then park the grading equipment across the road so no one could get on without him knowing, and then look for footprints first thing in the morning. He would set up tripwire cameras out in the woods. He was out there trying to see that animal, trying to find that Bigfoot. He brought his pastor out. He brought friends out. They smelled it, so they found weird nests out in the woods. They found more footprints. They never did see the thing. But so I've got that interview as well, kind of Jerry Crew, the first real Bigfooter. And he had to be the first Bigfooter, even though other people were looking for Bigfoot before that. It's because he's the guy who made up the word Bigfoot. So he wins, Let's see, we have another. Gosh, what else did I do on there? Oh, Bobcat Goldthwait makes a surprise appearance in one of my things there, one of my little segments. So he's been a good sport about that with me. Gosh, what else? I don't know. I've got a couple other interesting things on there too. Please forgive me if I don't remember, but but I've been so focused on the Jerry Crew segment that that's one that's prominent in my head.
I still
I'm
remember
sorry, say again, please?
the first time I ever saw Craig Flippy was when he did the video of him riding his moped up from California. And that was hilarious.
Yeah, and this is like the 10-year anniversary of it, which is why he's making that feature film based on that. Yeah, that was 10 years ago. So it's kind of a look back on that trip, and then looking at where he is now, how his life has changed all throughout trying to live his crappy little dreams.
Cliff is a very,
it's a lot of fun.
low-key guy if you meet him. I mean, I remember when I got a copy of Bigfoot Road Trip, and I had you sign it, Cliff, and then I had Craig sign it. He's like, "What? No, you're just as big a part of it as Cliff is." So, but he's a very kind of laid-back guy. So, but a hell of a sense of humor.
He's kind of got the reputation as a weirdo and a freak, of course. And all people go up to him, because Bigfoot Road Trip isn't like a one big story arch. It's a bunch of little segments, basically, little vignettes that are connected by these two puppets watching television and changing the channel between them. It kind of has a Mystery Science Theater 2000 or whatever that show was. It kind of has that feel to it, where the Bigfoot. Yeah, the Bigfoot puppets in between the segments either make fun of the segment that just happened and then change the channel. So it's kind of cute in that way. But when people saw it, they said, "Oh no, this is really demeaning to research." I said, "Well, no, you just take yourself too seriously, honestly." And they'd go to Craig and say, "How come you put those puppets in there? I thought that was or either great or stupid or whatever they think. It doesn't matter what they think." So. And then Craig would go, "That wasn't me. That was Cliff. Cliff did all that." And then they go, "What? I thought Cliff was a serious, whatever." And yeah, I am serious about it, but why can't you have fun while you're being serious,
Yeah, it's funny that people get so uptight about. I mean, you go online, and I've left many Bigfoot groups. I just got tired of the bickering. When it comes down to it, it's Bigfooting. It's not. People are not living and dying based on Bigfoot research. So for people to get so uptight about it is kind of ridiculous. So, Cliff, one of your
you can smile and
go ahead. Yeah, you can do both. You can have fun and Bigfoot. Yeah, but it is true. You can actually have
That's
fun.
kind of why I do it.
Yeah.
Right.
What's going on with the Orang Pendak Project? Any new news there?
Oh,
maybe give our listeners a little bit of background on it.
Okay, a little background first. When I was in Sumatra for the show, for Finding Bigfoot, we went there looking for evidence of the Orang Pendak, and I was lucky enough to be the guy tapped to go camping on that expedition. So, we're in Sumatra, we're in Indonesia, which is Sumatra's an island in Indonesia. They aren't going to let me go camping alone in a tiger preserve, right? They're just not going to let me. That's the network decision and, insurance reasons and all that other stuff. So we had a small group of guys that go out with us. I think there are about 4 other guys, porters basically, which is good because, it was about a 6-mile hike in there, all uphill. Apparently switchbacks are an American invention, or at least a North American thing, because in Indonesia there's no switchbacks at all. It just goes straight up the hill. And it was a big steep hill and stuff. And it was a very, very tiring, grueling hike in 85-degree weather and 150% humidity, if such a thing exists. It sure felt like that, at least. And so I was up there for about 4 nights, if I remember right. And I spoke to those guys, and it turns out that one of the guys, Jonisa was his name, was the son of a tracker who had been employed by Adam Davies in the past. And, of course, Adam Davies had been looking for the Orang Pendak before in Sumatra. So it was on one of his expeditions, I think in 2000 or 99 to 2001, somewhere in there. I don't remember where. They pulled what was, at that point, to my knowledge, the first Orang Pendak footprint casts out of the ground. And Jonisa's dad was on that trip, an excellent tracker. And then when I started talking to witnesses in Sumatra, I kept hearing again and again that the witnesses had seen these things within the last 6 months. And that's not even true of Sasquatch reports for the most part. A lot of times you're talking to somebody who saw one a year or 2 ago. But most of our witnesses had seen them like in the last 6 months. And so I started and then Dally, who was another guy that we employed there, Dally has a really great command of English. He has technology because a lot of the people we were dealing with in Indonesia, in Sumatra, were illiterate. in any language. They didn't speak English, and so Dali was translating it for us and stuff. So I kind of kept some contacts when I left, because it occurred to me that, these people are, farming chilies and cinnamon and stuff like that for a living. That's what they do over there. They cut down national forests, and then they put a farm in there, which sounds crazy to us, but that's what they do. In fact, they even, about 10 years before we were there, I believe, they set up a ranger district, like headquarters, in this area of Kerinci-Sablat National Forest, or National Park, rather, to stop the people from farming it and cutting down the rainforest and farming it. And after it opened and people realized what was going on, they all got together and they burnt the ranger station down and ran the rangers out of town. So they're still deforesting it, unfortunately, and stuff. So anyway, these people are living in this Kerinci-Sablat National Park area, and they're farming for a living, subsistence farming, right? So I said, hey, you know what, you guys, you were fantastic guides for us. Your ear is to the ground. You live here. If you hear about one of your neighboring farmer guys out here running across an Orang Pendak, like having seen one, and it comes across your table, I'll pay you for your time off your field. Go there, check it out. See if you can find footprints. If you can, cast them and send them to me, And that started like 3 years ago or 4 years ago now or something like that. I forget I have to go back and check the date, but 2013, I believe, anyway. So 3 years ago. And it's been going on ever since. It turns out that my hunch of empowering the locals was spot on, because when I started this project, there were maybe 3 footprint casts that I'm aware of. Adam got one with his partners there, and it wasn't just his endeavor. He had cohorts in crime there. And one of those guys got another interesting print that could be a print, could be something else, we don't really know. And then Debbie Martyr got one, I believe, back in the 90s or the early 2000s or something like that. I've only seen one photograph of that print in a book by a guy named Gregory Forth called Images of the Southeast Asian Wildman. But so there are 3 prints in the world before I started this project. And now 3 or 4 years later, I'm up to about 60. So I've been very, very fortunate to kind of get in at the ground level of this thing. And even though I don't live in Sumatra, I can still do work there through the people that I met there and have relationships with. And it still goes on to this day. There have been 3 hits since 2016 started. People see these things a lot. And the footprint casts seem to be legitimate. I could be the silly American who's getting duped, but I don't think so for a number of reasons. Number one is that for these people that I'm employing out there, it's like a family pride thing for them, because Jonice's dad was the renowned for being the best hunter in the Kerinci area, or the best tracker in the Kerinci area. These people are honest, good folks. So number one, I trust them as individuals. I don't think that they'd be lying to me. Number two, a couple of the folks in the project, a couple of their helpers and stuff, had a falling out at one point over some money situation, as often happens in situations like this. And neither one of them has said the other guy sent you a bunch of fake prints. Neither one. And in fact, prints that I've gotten from both sides of that argument since then are all they're all similar. Like anatomically similar. So, and they seem to show variation in toe position and depth and splay and all the stuff that I look for in real casts. And most surprising to me and most bewildering to me is I started just looking for Orang Pendak footprint casts to learn a little bit more about the creatures, because any tracker will tell you, if you follow a track line, it tells a story of what the animal was doing and thinking at the time. Going for food, going for water, how it approached an area, how it left an area, the whole thing. I found out a lot of stuff about Orang Pendak since then. But one of my guys started exploring areas in other parts of Sumatra. And it wasn't too long before footprint tracks of an entirely different thing started showing up. Something called the Orang Gadang, or also known as the Orang Gugu, G-U-G-U, named after the sound this thing makes. And like Gugu, 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 like that sort of thing. So they call this thing the Orang Gugu or the Orang Gadang. The word orang, by the way, means man in the local language, which is why orangutans are called that. Utan is forest. So orangutan means man of the forest. So now the Orang Pendak Project has turned up an entirely new species, basically, that has been rumored. You can find books on it. You can find brief mentions of them in the small amount of literature that's been published on the Orang Pendak about another larger critter that lives in another part of the island. See, orang pendeks are usually about 3 or 4 feet tall, it seems. Orang gadangs, or orang gugus, tend to be about 5.5 feet tall. So they're a little bit bigger variety of them. And their feet are similar but different. And the cool thing about it, when I first started getting these things, I was thinking, oh my gosh, what is this? Is this some sort of weird, what kind of footprint is this? Like, what else lives there that I could be mistaken for these things? Even though the witnesses are saying they saw them and these footprints are found afterwards, it's like, okay, what else could be going on here? And I started looking around, and you catch on the news a couple years ago in Malaysia, was it Johor? I don't remember exactly. I think it was Johor. They were finding strange footprints that didn't match anything. They said it was a Bigfoot of Malaysia. Well, these footprints match those footprints, and Malaysia is just across the water to the north of Sumatra. So we could have that thing living down in the Sumatra as well, just like a wider, because, orangutans are on Sumatra and they're also in Borneo, and that's separated by water. So why couldn't these things, a terrestrial version, have done the same thing as the orangutans, just spread, when the water level is lower and stuff like that. And also, interestingly enough, Josh Gates from Destination Truth, he collected a cast one time that seems to be legitimate. A Sherpa actually found it. It was a Yeti cast, but a Sherpa found it. Josh didn't find it, but a Sherpa found it, and then I think Josh might have cast it, or the Sherpa cast. It doesn't matter who collected it though. From the Himalayas, and that print shows a remarkable similarity to these things too, the orang gugus. So that's a very long-winded explanation of what's been going on lately with the Orang Pendak Project. I've got a whole bunch of Orang Pendak stuff, and now I have a small number, perhaps a half dozen or so, prints of something new that I'm still just barely beginning to explore because it isn't really present in the literature, and very few people go looking for anything like that, and almost nobody talks about it. This is new. This is new and Orang Pendak Project was groundbreaking in my view. I'm super excited about it. But coming across this other critter out there, it's just blowing my mind.
Yeah. Rather exciting, Cliff. I mean, with the Orang Pendak. I mean, you talked about some similarities, but have you found more similarities with the track impressions, these castings, maybe possibly coming from the same individual? Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Particularly when you map out where they are, like the villages aren't that far apart for the most part. And they're all most of them are within the Kerinci Sablat National Park. So it's very possible that it's certain that I have casts of the same individual, because it can't be very common, otherwise we'd know about them, I think. So they must be very rare. And they seem to come down in the farms and raid the sugar cane, and they eat corn and stuff like that. They steal from the farmers, just like Sasquatches do in North America, and also just like orangutans do in Borneo and Sumatra. They come down and they stay in the trees, of course. And of course, people out there listening might be thinking, well, how do you know these aren't orangutan footprints? The feet are nothing alike. Well, they're alike in that they have a divergent hallux, like their big toe sticks out to the side like your thumb does on your hand. But beyond that, they're nothing alike. Orangutans have very long toes that are kind of curled and stuff like that. And these things have short, stubby toes, as would be expected from a habitual biped. Their hallux is off to the side, their big toes off to the side, which is not really expected from a biped. But when you go back to the stories of the Orang Pendak and eyewitness encounters, even back hundreds of years, these things are often seen in trees. There's a very famous report back from a very historical report where this thing goes up in a tree and out on a limb. It's like walking bipedally out on a limb. Well, if that's the case, and these things are habitually both on the ground and in trees, well, then we should expect to see that divergent hallux. And sure enough, we do. So we have short, stubby toes that would help in the push-off stage of the walking gait, and then we have the walking phase at least, and then we have the divergent hallux to help it grasp the trees and whatnot. It seems to line up with their observed behavior rather well, and the footprints are agreeing with each other. And one of the great things about this is that at first the guys were like,
they would just take pictures of the prints in the ground. I said, no, cast them, send them to me. And then they'd cast one. And it was the same mistake that Bigfooters were making back in the 60s, you know. They would find a print, and they would find the best, cleanest looking one, and they'd cast it. And that's it. And that's how we get a lot of those footprints, you know. That's why Roger and Bob only pulled one from the Patterson-Gimlin site. But it took somebody like Bob Titmus, who goes back and casts 10 in a row, because those 10 footprints are going to have a lot more information than just 2. And if you cast 10 footprints in a row, or even 5 footprints in a row, you're going to be able to see the differentiation between each print. And so that's what I had my Sumatran contacts do. And I have one line of tracks that I have 5 or 6 from the same individual in a row, and that's by far the most informative track line I have so far. But now they try to I told them, I don't care if they're messy, cast them. I don't care, just cast them. So they basically cast them now until they run out of plaster. And now, mind you, these guys are hiking 6-8 miles back into the jungle to these places, so I don't ask them to carry 50 pounds of plaster with them. So I'm usually getting like 3 or 4, maybe 5 casts at a time from each individual find now, which is really nice. And again, when you look at the differentiation and and when you look at the footprints themselves, the context tells the story, but also the depth of certain parts of the foot tell an anatomical story in the foot. It turns out that these things seem to have flexibility in the mid part of the foot. Lo and behold, just like every other ape species except for humans, we're the only ones that have retained a flexible. Humans are the only apes hominoid that has lost the flexibility in their foot. Ours is held static by ligaments and tendons and what appears to be your longitudinal arch, the arch that goes from the front to the back of your foot. And we have that because our ancestors were hunters, persistence hunters, which means they chased prey. We're long-distance runners, basically, habitually. But Orang Pendaks aren't. They're semi-arboreal, ground-dwelling, walking things, So they would have retained flexibility in the mid part of their foot, just like you have flexibility in the mid part of your hand in order to grab the trees better as they go up and down them and out on limbs and stuff. So, and then the tracks tell a story, whether it's behavioral or anatomical. The tracks have a story, and I've learned a tremendous amount about the Orang Pendaks from this project.
Yeah, truly fascinating and very exciting, because here's another mystery out there in a different part of the world other than North America that could exist. Cliff, other than the castings, the impressions, and some of the stories shared with you, encounters, is there any other pieces of evidence or anything that the Orang Pendak is thought to do that have been shared with you or have you come across?
Well, the information coming out of Sumatra is scant even now. I've extended that book of knowledge a little bit. I think quite far actually compared to what it was even 10 years ago. But still, the knowledge coming out of Sumatra is fairly small. But I have this idea now that looking at Sasquatch-like creatures, or hairy hominoids, I should say, because Orang Pendaks aren't exactly Sasquatch-like. Looking at hairy hominoids that bipedal and all that stuff, looking from all over the world, I'm starting to be able to hypothesize possible groupings at this point. Like I do think that Sasquatches are rather not common, but there are a lot of places. Obviously North America. I think I'm confident they're in South America now. That I've been to Brazil and talked to witnesses down there. They call them Mapinguari in Brazil. Although some people think that's a sloth, and I'm not saying that there is not a cryptid sloth out there, but certainly some of the witnesses we spoke to did not see a sloth. They saw a Sasquatch. So they're in North and South America. I think they're historically in Europe. I have spoken face-to-face with one individual that saw one in Germany in the Black Forest. And I have emails from several other former military guys stationed in the Czech Republic that have seen them there. So they're in Europe as well. They're certainly in Asia. And are they in Africa? I don't know, because almost no information comes out of Africa. It's hard to say what's down there. But now if you look at the Orang Pendak, are they an isolated population that's only on Sumatra? I doubt that. And when I start looking elsewhere, looking for hairy hominoids that have been described like the Orang Pendak, the most solid lead I have is one biologist who I was communicating with for a while. That his specialty is peafowl, like peacocks and stuff like that. And he was in Cambodia, excuse me, on the border of Laos for about a week or two doing a study on his birds, right? And there was this one valley that his guides say, no, we don't go down there because weird stuff happens. It's weird down there. You don't want to go there, right? And so he didn't go. But over the period of that week, on several occasions, he had extended observations of ground-dwelling, mostly ground-dwelling orangutan-like creatures that at the time he just wrote off as orangutans that were especially adept at walking on the ground. He said that they were very comfortable. They would run, they would walk. And orangutans, if you've seen them walk on the ground, they're not exactly comfortable running around on two legs. They are quadrupeds. They're habitual quadrupeds. But these things were zipping around, running on two legs, but they had real long arms, and then they'd zip up a tree and walk around in the tree and like up and down logs and stuff. They'd go up and down bipedally or quadrupedally. He had several extended observations of these things, and they were about 3 or 4 feet tall. I'm thinking, oh, that to me sounds like an Orang Pendak. And he saw them on a number of occasions, and he's a competent observer, an excellent witness. I see no reason to doubt him whatsoever. And, the Southeast Asia is not far from Sumatra. And it seems to me that if these things are in Sumatra, they're likely somewhere else as well. And could that even be the explanation for the smallest of the 3 Yetis that are reported? Maybe. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I have no idea. Yeah. And now this new thing, this orangutan thing, maybe that's even like a subspecies of the Orang Pendak or vice versa. What's more common, I guess, because their foot strongly resembles that Yeti print. It makes me kind of wonder about that, And, of course, when you look at the discovery of Homo floresiensis, the hobbit species on the nearby island of Flores, which is also in Indonesia, I initially thought Orang Pendaks were probably just those things that were still alive. But based on the foot morphology, it's clear that that's not the case. The Homo floresiensis, their big toe goes straight ahead like ours. It's adducted is the word for that. So there's another weird thing there. But it turns out on the island of Flores, as well as some of the surrounding islands, there's stories of little hairy man things about 3 or 4 feet tall that are much more human-like than Orang Pendaks are reported to be. Like very much small human-like hairy things. Whereas Orang Pendaks aren't generally thought of as human-like. The witnesses don't describe them as little people. They describe them as monkeys or apes. Monkeys have tails, apes don't. So they'd be apes, but they describe them very much like siamangs or gibbons that are bigger and stockier and running on 2 legs, basically. Whereas these things on Flores, they're called Ibu Gogo. Ibu Gogo. All the local native folk in the area, they have stories of these things. The most recent stuff was about from 200 years before when they cornered some in a cave and burned them alive in there. I think Homo floresiensis is alive and well and living on Flores and even further south. Because when you look at Australia, that has Bigfoot sort of reports called the Yowie, they also have this other thing that all the Aborigines guys say, these are not baby Yowies. They are different. They are full grown when they're about 4 feet tall. They call them brown jacks. Now, there's other local names for them as well, but brown jacks is the name that I was introduced to when I was in Australia. But I think that looking at one of the things I've learned and one of the suspicions I have based on the Orang Pendak Project is that Orang Pendaks are alive and well in a couple areas of the world, just like every other weird, like unknown, so to speak, hominoid species, pockets of them here and there that are not isolated things for the most part. So I think they spread widely, being large terrestrial mammals, because that's what large terrestrial mammals do. They spread their terrain. They travel. They travel great distances. So
yeah. One of the things that Gunnar and I were discussing the other night was the fact that if Orang Pendak was discovered or proven to exist, what would be the implications towards Sasquatch and its discovery, or at least recognition, with the scientific community? If Orang Pendak was proven to exist, do you think that would give science a little more credence to look into the Sasquatch subject a little more seriously?
Not a lot at first. I think that the logical chain of events in my mind would be if somebody proved the Orang Pendak is real, brings one in, a dead one or whatever, then they'd probably go find other ones and stuff. Then they'd start looking at other areas in that part of the world that have stories like, hairy hominoids. And it turns out that a lot of those Indonesian islands have wild men stories, hairy wild men stories, and some of them are real small, like the Ibu Gogo or the Orang Pendak, and some of them are like 3 meters tall, like 9 feet tall, like basically considering how humans don't estimate height and distances very well, somewhere between 7 and 9 feet tall, which is basically a Sasquatch as far as I'm concerned. Because if there's Sasquatch-like creatures in Southeast Asia, which there are, and Sasquatch-like creatures in Australia, which there are, well, fill in the gap. There are some in Indonesia. And in fact, I know a witness who saw one on Papua New Guinea. One of the most competent naturalists and observers I've ever run across in my entire life, a man named Gary Opit, who's a well-known cryptozoologist in Australia. He is an eyewitness to a Sasquatch, a 7.5-foot Sasquatch in Papua New Guinea. So there's a competent observer with a story that's not that old from the 1980s seeing one of these things. So I think that if the Orang Pendak was proven to be real, I think one of the first things that would happen is that anthropologists would dust off their books and start looking into the oral history of local tribes and people and ethnic groups in Indonesia, and looking for other places in Indonesia that unknown apes might exist. And through that, perhaps a Sasquatch-like critter, like a Bigfoot, basically a big one, could be discovered. And if one is discovered in another part of the world, then that would eventually lead them back to North America. But I think the level of arrogance and hubris right now in science, which is what basically stops most scientists from looking into the Bigfoot thing right now, is like, no, they couldn't possibly be real because we know about them by now. That's not going to change if a 3.5, 4 foot tall ape in Indonesia is discovered. But perhaps something similar could be discovered in Indonesia, and then that would bring them back to North America.
To interject there is the fact that you're involved heavily with the Orang Pendak and some of the casting specifically, and funding people to actively locate track impressions and evidence, and having known that you are involved heavily here in the continental United States with the subject of Sasquatch, Bigfoot, it may be a bridge possibly, and they'll look at this and go, okay, this is a positive endeavor that's proven something, the Orang Pendak. Let's look what else. Let's look and see what else Cliff is doing, and maybe there's truth to some of what your findings.
It's possible, and but again, for the vast majority of scientists, I'm just some crackpot on TV making a reality show. I mean, that's the truth. I'm nobody special. I have a degree in music, is what it comes down to. Like, I'm nobody special. I just collect cats like I collect baseball cards or something. I don't collect baseball cards, but you get the idea. Sure, I have some scientists' ear. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have a direct line to a number of PhDs who are very interested in the Sasquatch thing, and even some PhDs who are interested in the Orang Pendak thing. I'm very lucky in that way that they take me seriously. But most of science wouldn't, and I'd have to go through them to get stuff done anyway, which is fine. I don't mind that a bit. But what I think the biggest takeaway of all from the Orang Pendak Project is, at least for my mind, the biggest takeaway of everything that I've learned is the strategy that I employed getting the Orang Pendak evidence. Is you empower the locals. That's by far the most powerful thing I can tell anybody listening to this podcast. If you want to get any evidence, you empower the people who live there. And whether it's in Sumatra or whether it's on the Kitsap Peninsula of Washington or the Olympic, up by Forks in the Olympic Peninsula, or Southern California, people say they're on the property, or in Kentucky or Florida or wherever it happens to be, you talk to the people who live there and let them get the job done. You empower them. Because what generally happens, like say somebody over here in Mount Hood, up by Sandy or something like that, has a Bigfoot that's been raiding their trash can for the last week, okay? They somehow get a hold of me. I get the message. They email me with their report and stuff, and I'm interested enough to talk to them. I do that. I go out to the situation, right? If I go out to their property, the Bigfoot is going to notice, first of all. People underestimate Sasquatches. They're going to notice. And this has been shown before. Dennis Foll, a good friend of mine who lives in Colorado, excellent researcher. He was telling me about a long-term witness that he was working with, and stuff would happen every night and stuff. He'd show up, nothing. He'd go away. It would start happening again. And he eventually figured out, oh, it's my car. Of course. I mean, how stupid that I think these things were. Of course they're smarter than that. So he'd park a couple miles down the road, get picked up and brought back, and then stuff would continue happening. Once you enter the situation as a researcher, you change the situation. Bigfoots catch on. It's something's out of the ordinary, and Bigfoots are going to clam up and not give you anything, basically. But if you empower the local person who lives there or who goes to that spot or whatever the situation is, they have a much higher chance of walking away with tangible evidence than you ever will as a Bigfoot researcher. And that's why if you have somebody with a long-term witness situation, that's why you lend them trail cameras or you teach them how to make a footprint cast or something like that. They can get the job done better than you can. Because you have to drop everything you're doing and get a day off of work to go out there, But they're already there, and if you can empower the locals, you'll walk away with more at the end of the day than any other method I've ever known.
Yeah, I was gonna say on the topic of researchers, Cliff. There's a certain stigmata with the labeling of a Bigfoot researcher. You often I've heard you say this time and time again. You're a learner. You're enthusiast, a learner of the subject. Why is there? What is a Bigfoot? What is a researcher to you? And is there such a thing?
Researcher to me is just kind of a word that people put on themselves or others. If you're interested in the Bigfoot thing and you're learning about them, you're pretty much researching. I mean, when I taught elementary school, I'd ask my students to research a topic. And they would go read about it and come back with a little, presentation or something, and they researched. Researcher sounds so important too, and what a cool thing to be, a Bigfoot researcher. So a lot of people like that label. They put that label on themselves or others or their group or whatever, and that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. The contrast I always say between myself, a Bigfoot learner, is with the Bigfoot expert. I'm often, when I'm on a news program or interviewed for this or that or something, or in an article, I'm often billed as a Bigfoot expert. And, I guess compared to the rest of the population, I kind of am because I know a lot of stuff about the history and I have a lot of experience. But expert implies a level of familiarity and knowledge that I don't think anybody can really profess. Anybody can really lay claim to because, where do Bigfoot sleep? Cliff? You got me there. I've got some ideas I can share with you, but I don't know. What's their day like, Cliff? If I can't even tell you what an average Bigfoot's day like, how can I call myself an expert? But I've got some ideas based on the experiences I've had. I've got some hypotheses. Some might even qualify as theories, but really at this point, it's a lot of speculation and hypotheses. So I don't like the word expert, even though that label is often put on me. I don't think that highly of myself. So, but I'm just trying to learn about these things like everyone else is, and I think that's what that's really what a researcher is. A researcher is someone who's actively trying to learn about these things, And so there are a good number of people out in the field today that qualify as a researcher in that way. And there's a lot of people that are just interested in the subject. They're not necessarily trying to learn about them. They're just interested in the subject and what goes on. And that's cool too, because I want everybody to enjoy the Bigfoot thing in one way or another, even if you're just into those campy movies that are continually being made about, homicidal Sasquatches. That's cool too. It doesn't matter to me. I want everybody to love Bigfoot because it goes back to what I said earlier. The more people who love Bigfoot, the larger army they're going to have behind them, their rights. their land, their food resources and protection after the eventual discovery really does happen.
That's great points. I have one caller who wants to ask you a quick question, Cliff. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Hello, Cliff.
Alyssa,
my name is Elisa.
You're on the air with Cliff. Go ahead.
Hello, Cliff.
Hello.
My question is, what got you into the whole Bigfoot stuff?
Oh, well, I've always been kind of weird, honestly. Like, for as long as back as I can remember, I was like the eccentric one in my family and in the class and stuff like that. So I've always had an interest in the weird stuff. Growing up in the 1970s, as we mentioned earlier, I would watch the TV shows like In Search Of and stuff, and I loved monsters, whether it's Godzilla, King Kong, or Bigfoot, because to me, 5, 6 years old, they're all the same thing. They're all just as real as the other one is. Much to my chagrin later in life, I learned that Godzilla wasn't real. It was just a movie thing. But that Bigfoot one never quite went away, And then when I was in college, it was really reading in books that convinced me that Sasquatches were real. I found a book with a bunch of scholarly papers written about Sasquatches in my college library, and I started reading about it, and these people were very intelligent academics who were studying the subject. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I mean, not only are Bigfoots funny and quirky and cool monsters, but they might be real animals too. So I started looking into it since I was already camping and stuff. So, that's kind of the short version of the story. I'm kind of a weird guy who likes weird things, but I'm also smart, and I like to read books. And I suppose it was the books that really made me realize these things are real. And then I started looking for them, and I started finding some stuff and finding people, and here I am, 20-something years later, still being weird.
I can't wait to meet you at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference in May. I'm super excited.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's going to be fun. I mean, the Ohio conference is ridiculous. So many people show up, and it's so much fun meeting everybody. And so that's going to be a great time. I've actually started thinking about my presentation, which, shame on me, by the way. I'm speaking at Hopsquatch in April, and I haven't even started that presentation yet, but I'm already looking forward to Ohio. So, yeah, it's going to be great. So when you show up to Ohio, make sure you introduce yourself to me, okay?
I will.
Cool. Hello? Did I lose everybody? It's all quiet now.
Yeah, I got to work on that mute button thing. So, thanks, Cliff, for talking to Alyssa. She was excited to have an opportunity to say hi. So.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all. I enjoy saying hi to all the fans and people out there.
And that's a question I like. I mean, do you qualify as a Bigfoot celebrity as much as anybody that is out there in Bigfooting? How is that? You're a pretty reserved, private guy in your personal life. How do you match that up with being, on a very popular TV show?
Sometimes it's very difficult for me. I mentioned a moment ago the Ohio conference, for example. It's ridiculously crowded, and there's people swarming everywhere. I think Mark told me 2 years ago when I spoke, like 2,000 or 3,000 people came through the doors. And of course, not all those people have tickets to go see the talks and stuff. But there's a vending area, and I'm milling around out there and stuff, so people can have a chance to meet me and stuff. Sometimes it's just overwhelming because you guys know me personally. You've both been to my home. You know that I'm you guys are usually over for barbecues or something like that, a party situation. But in general, I spend a lot of my time alone with with my dog or something like that. And that's it. I go camping alone a lot, not always, but a lot. I really like my alone time, and so to go to a public event, I love it. Don't get me wrong. I love it. I love meeting people, and it's an honor that so many people are interested in, meeting me and sharing their experiences. But it does tax me very heavily. And for some reason, I guess I'm not that smart or something, because being a quiet introvert like I am, I've always had jobs that really an extrovert would be far better suited for. whether it's being on television like now, or being an elementary school teacher, or being a salesperson, or whatever else, leading Bigfoot expeditions when I did that for Matt back in the day, you know, like those are all extrovert jobs. You know, you got to be out there interacting and meeting people and like loving like the talk and stuff. And I'm good at it. I think I'm actually very good at it, all modesty aside, but it is taxing on me. So I do have to take extra pains to achieve balance in my life, you know, because I am a public figure. I got to make sure that I go the other way. The pendulum swings the other direction equally far. So that's always been a challenge for me, whether it's been for when I was an elementary school teacher or now that I'm on television. I have to make sure that I have that cliff time. Otherwise, I start getting even weirder.
But that's one of the things that my experiences with you, if you're very gracious with your time and generous with, you know, and it is, I think people get hung up on the fact that, oh yeah, you're on TV and it's kind of a glamorous thing and you get to go travel. They don't see the amount of work and sacrifice actually the people that commit to doing these kinds of projects put in. And I remember talking to Matt Moneymaker at the last episode of the first season of Finding Bigfoot, and you guys were really not well compensated. Those early days were not, you know, it was an experiment. They were putting this show on. The conversation when talking to Matt, it was like, yeah, we got crappy equipment, and they're making us do stuff we don't want to do, and we're not going to pay that much. I mean, it didn't start out like 5 seasons ago. You had no idea that it would last this long. Did you ever imagine that you'd be making a living Bigfooting?
No. I think it's a surprise to all of us, really, that the show's been as successful as it has been. And back first season, certainly the pay wasn't good enough to live on, even for my meager existence as an elementary school teacher. It just wasn't that much. We're all very fortunate that it's gone on as long as it has, and it's and things, because of the success of the show, it gave us leverage to make the show better. First season, there was some deceptive editing where they made it look like Matt and Bobo saw a Bigfoot, but they saw a horse instead. The thing on the hill that Matt chases off, they circle Matt chasing it off instead of the thing itself, which I to this day, by the way, I still think is probably a Sasquatch. But so there was some kind of editorial sleight of hand, you know. But whatever. I mean, as far as I was concerned, it's like, oh, they did that to us? So I just went on my blog, like when I saw the episode air, I just went on my blog and told the truth, which, of course, the production company wasn't super happy with. But once the show was a success, once the numbers came in for that season and everybody was watching the show, that gave us leverage to say that we're not going to put up with those kinds of shenanigans anymore. Like, you can't edit us like that. You can't put fake sounds in instead of the real ones. You can't make it seem like we saw a Sasquatch if we know darn well we saw a horse, you know, and all that stuff. And kudos to not only the production company, but our showrunners, the people who were on the show, the people at the network, Keith Hoffman, the people at Animal Planet, and all the way up the line to the CEO of Discovery at the time. All of those people were behind our idea. Like, this idea is so compelling, and the viewers are interested enough in it that we don't have to do that to have the show be a success. There's a lot of shows out there that are billed as reality shows that could not be anything further from reality. They are scripted. They find fake stuff, and they tout it as real. Every noise they hear in the woods is a Bigfoot or something, whatever they're looking for, you know. There's a lot of nonsense on television. And after all these years, even through the troubles that we still have nowadays, you know, because Bigfooting on TV is not exactly like real Bigfooting, because you have to have cameras there. If you don't have cameras and lights, you don't have a TV show. And that's what we're getting paid to do, after all. But after all this time, I can actually say I'm actually proud of Finding Bigfoot. I wouldn't have said that at the beginning, but now I can say that. I'm actually proud of Finding Bigfoot for bringing the most realistic the most real, not even realistic, the most real Bigfooting you possibly can to television. We really are out there doing things. We really are out there like hearing stuff. If we say we heard it, you can bet your bottom dollar that we heard something. If we say, I think that's a Sasquatch, you can guarantee, take it to the bank, that whoever said that thinks that's a Sasquatch. I'm not saying they're right. I'm not even saying I'm right all the time. But I'm saying that we are not asked to lie on the show. We are not asked to deceive. It is a TV show. Do we need to take speedboats to get to the location? No, not really. Not all the time. Sometimes, but not no. Do we need to take, fancy ATVs to get? No, not really. That's the TV part. And please forgive me for making television. It's my job. But when it comes to the Bigfoot thing, witnesses, when we're out there on a night investigation, when we're doing the solo camping thing, all of that, 100% real. We do not and will not lie. And to their credit, the production company and the amazing group of people they send out with us never ask us to. Never ask us to. In interviews, they may say, okay, now that sound that you heard that you think is that's probably a Bigfoot or whatever. And I might say, well, I'm not so sure it's a Bigfoot. And they say, okay, Cliff, word it however you want. Because what the producers are looking for, the producers are editing in their mind. Like as they're filming the show, they're taking notes and they're thinking in their mind how this scene connects with this scene and what the order is going to be. Because the story editor goes home at the end of the day, goes to the hotel at the end of the day, and strings out that and like writes up a brief outline of a way that scene could go based on the shots that we got. And so the producers are always thinking. And so when they interview us, they ask us those things that could connect the scenes. You know what I mean? TV is a very, very interesting media to work in because there's so many aspects to it that I would have never thought of if I wasn't working in it. Little things, too, like there's got to be a beginning, middle, and end to every scene, which is why we always do a drive-up shot. You can see us getting out of the car at a witness's place, 90% of the time. You can see us driving up to town hall 90% of the time. We never think about it because we're viewers of television, and psychologically that's what we're looking for. And when it's given to us, we don't even notice. But if it's not there, that's when people notice. And so that's what the producers are doing. They're making television based on the experience they have in previous shows and what they know about human psychology and television and stuff, to piece these scenes together so the viewer at home never notices a thing. And the less people notice of all that psychological side of TV, the better job the producers and editors did. Anyway, I got a little sidetracked. My train of thought was derailed, but I think you get my gist. So
yeah, absolutely. Cliff, getting back to North America here, what are some of the more interesting findings of recent that you've partaken in here in North America, probably the Pacific Northwest? Any new evidence, castings, encounters that you've been shared with, that you've researched, that you'd like to share?
Well, for the most part, it's been kind of quiet lately, but it's also been winter, and things really shut down a lot in winter. It's almost certainly a human thing because Bigfoots are somewhere. I don't think they hibernate or anything, but they might, hang out in one spot a little longer and be a little bit less active. I've picked up a number of footprint casts from a witness up in Washington recently. She's been finding them in one certain area, not far from where she lives, and she started casting them this year, which is really cool. She had about 9 when I met with her, but I borrowed, I think, 4 of the better ones or 5 of the better ones. There seem to be several individuals involved, so I'm currently making copies of those casts to add to the data set. Of course, I was out with you a couple weeks ago, Shane, you and Derek. So Derek's been, I think he's publicly announced the nesting stuff now, right? I know he's on a radio show talking. Yeah, I didn't want to blow that before he publicly announced anything, but he told me about those last spring. So I know that I've been sitting on that information a long time, and Derek and you and James from the Olympic Project were kind enough to invite me out to go put my eyes on them and see what I thought of them. And sure enough, I don't know what I think of those things. They're weird. It's like like Big Bird from Sesame Street is out there making nests under old growth tree or something like that. So that was pretty cool. That's probably the most credible bedding situation that I've ever seen. But now the job is to go back and look for others from the literature to see what else can be matched to it. I know Derek and you guys from the Olympic Project have been doing a great job matching it to ground nests of gorillas, but maybe there's other evidence from North America, from other areas that show a similar structure. So now that job is on the bookworms in the Bigfoot community, the real researchers who go back and read instead of just watch YouTube videos. Because I think that if you're going to learn something about Bigfoot, you have to know whose shoulders you're standing upon. And and YouTube's a great resource, but man, anybody could have a YouTube channel, but it really takes research, dedication, and discipline to produce a book. So I think that going back to the historical archives of the earlier researchers, all the way up until the 90s, in particular, long before Finding Bigfoot was on TV and everybody started writing books, I think going back to the people who were writing books before the show is the best research you could do to extend your own knowledge for Bigfoot, but also look for things like evidence of nests like these. Is anyone else talking about them, or is there any brief mention of big weird bird nests nearby a Bigfoot sighting? I can't think of any. Well, I can think of one from Ohio that I got to go back and dig up, but so anyway, those two things are the most recent things on my radar. The nests that Derek and you were kind enough to show me, and also those footprint casts. But I'm going to go up and return those casts later in the week, drive up to Washington, so I'll spend another night out in the woods, and who knows, maybe I'll come back with footage. I keep my fingers crossed every time I go out.
Yeah. It was a pleasure having you up there in this bedding nesting area and giving your insight, and you provided plenty of insight and suggestions and ideas with even possible contacts, and that was a pleasure. And that's, I know Derek was real excited to have you up there, as was we all were, and was glad that you had the opportunity to witness them. Have you, you kind of touched upon this, but have you seen anything out there quite like those bedding nesting areas? No.
I ran across a bear nest, or not a nest, a bear bedding area in, it was in Solal, I believe, in Northern California once. At least I wrote it off as bear. I didn't really see the bear in it. But it wasn't like that. I mean, because this looked like, like a bear doing about 20 turns like my dog does before she lays down, or she lies down. And then, so it was all flattened up and it's kind of bowl-shaped and stuff like these were. But these were different in that the branches and sticks that made up the nests were clearly taken from the surrounding plants. It being buried in the middle of these huckleberry patches, like, for 10 yards all around it or more. Like, you can see where the tops of these huckleberry branches were broken off and then brought to the spot. So that's really unusual. And as Derek pointed out that day, the bear biologist that he brought out there said that if this is bear, it's undocumented bear behavior. And really, look, from my opinion, whatever my opinion's worth, looking at these nests, they're either from a Bigfoot or a bear. I don't see any other possibility. But so if the bear biologist is out there saying that if it's a bear, this is undocumented bear behavior, I'd say the Olympic Project, either way, has a win on its hands. It has either brand new behavior from black bears that has never been observed or recorded anywhere else, or Sasquatch nests. And either way, I'd say that's a win. It's awesome. Yeah.
No. I totally agree with you there. Yeah, absolutely. The thing for me is there's a lot of exciting things happening now. I see future events and things going on that are exciting. I'm a very positive, uplifting person, and I find you to be the same way, Cliff. Where do you see the research of Sasquatch in this, going? Are we moving in a positive direction? Are we backtracking? Are we getting away from our initial love?
I don't know, honestly. I think that the number of Bigfooters is clearly growing, and with that, a larger amount of real evidence will come forth. But combined with that, a much larger amount of straight-out hoaxes and well-meaning but incorrect observations, misidentifications will also surface. I'm seeing a lack of scrutiny, unfortunately, in the online Bigfoot community that is a little saddening. But at the same time, for my goal is to have an army of enthusiastic Bigfooters advocating for Sasquatches after discovery. The people who are going out and seeing footprints around every corner and encountering Bigfoots all the time, it doesn't really matter because they're loving Bigfoots in their way. I don't think it really furthers the science of it all very far. But I want people to have experiences and stuff with Bigfoot. And if they think they're having it, that's great. That's great. Maybe they are. I mean, I'm not there. Maybe they are. Who am I to say? Because convincing oneself that Bigfoots are real really comes down to personal experience. Something scares you and throws rocks at you, then, you probably had a Bigfoot encounter, that sort of thing, but some people just get scared and think they're there. Or I think a vocabulary word for everybody in Bigfoot land should be pareidolia, which is the tendency for humans to see familiar shapes in things. Like when you look at the 3-prong outlet on your wall socket, people say it looks like a face. That's an example of pareidolia. When you look at a cloud and see a horse running, well, that's an example of pareidolia. When you look at a photograph of a woodscape and you have a bunch of red circles in there of all the Bigfoots hiding in the woods, that is also pareidolia. People seeing the familiar shape of what they're looking for. There's a great verse, I think, it's in the Bible, right? There's a great verse that more or less says, "Seek and ye shall find." I like putting on the added words, "Seek and ye shall find," even if it's not there. So we need to be a little careful about that. So with the added numbers of the Bigfoot army that are going on right now, there's a lot of junk out there, unfortunately, from over-enthusiastic observers. But I do see that some real stars, some real gems of researchers are coming up as well. Nathaniel Bronis comes to mind, for example, an astounding young man who does amazing Bigfoot work and is a witness himself. So he needs no convincing that Bigfoots are real. He's just out there dutifully trying to collect the data in some sort of meaningful way. There are great new researchers that are clearly going to be leaders in the next generation of Bigfooting. Now, whether or not that leads to any proof, if that is one's goal or not, is a different argument altogether. But we're Bigfooters, and apparently we're not going anywhere. So are we heading in the right direction? I think we're heading in the same direction, more or less. New things are being discovered. There are people out there who are willing to document some of the Bigfoot evidence they've been experiencing around their house. That's always been one of the loudest criticisms, I think, from the skeptics, is that of people like long-term witnesses or habituators, although I don't really dislike that word. If these people are seeing Bigfoots, how come there aren't more pictures or casts or films or whatever? Well, some people are now starting to try that, despite their overwhelming urge to protect the Sasquatches and stuff. And I get that, So I think that the more knowledge that comes about these things, the more real evidence and the more we're actually going to learn about them, and of course, knowledge is generally a good thing. The more you know, the better off I think you kind of are. So maybe the better we will get at getting more either footage or casts or evidence or encounters or probably most importantly, maybe we'll get better at having more compassion towards these things,
Well, thank you, Cliff. One of the things that I've noticed, there's some young people that are basing their career choice or their pursuit of a degree based on their interest in Bigfoot, and that's exciting because they're one of the things that I think is a benefit to the Bigfoot community is studying different fields, having different experts. Obviously, you, Cliff, have studied a broad amount of information that ties into Bigfoot. I know that Shane does the same thing, and I do that as well. But obviously to have kids that are coming up that are basing, they're going to go into the particular fields of science because of their interest in the subject is exciting to me. Coming up, I know that you are going to be at Guy Edwards' Hopsquatch event on the 15th of April from 6 to 9 p.m. And that I also learned this evening that you have not yet started your presentation for that. So I'm sure
I've got some ideas, kicking it around.
Well, I'm sure when you sit down to do it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, not to interrupt, I apologize, but the problem with Hopsquatch for me is they're all locals. And they've probably heard me speak somewhere else nearby, and I don't want to regurgitate the same stuff that I've done last time, Right. So like the last time I spoke at Hopsquatch, I think I did something on footprint impressions or just impressions in general, which is probably going to be my Ohio conference one. I want to revamp that with new stuff and new things I've learned and give that to them because it's rare that I can do it's rare that I can do a presentation for Bigfoot nerds, and I can really get nerdy with them. And Ohio is one of those times that I can do that. When I speak at colleges, like Centralia College, I did a gig a little while ago. That's generally the why I think Bigfoot is real talk. I can't do that with Ohio. I can do that, but I can do the I can't do the footprint nerd stuff in public, like the general public, because it's too far above them. They need a Bigfooting 101 course versus a Bigfoot 401 course. But Hopsquatch is somewhere in between. We get a lot of real hardcore Bigfooters, and we get a lot of enthusiasts in general. So I don't want to give them the same stuff I gave them last time. So right now I'm kind of kicking it around, like, what am I really going to do? Because I could talk for a long time on many subjects, as I've clearly demonstrated here, because I just have these rambling, long diatribes and rants based on your questions, right? But what do people want to hear? So I'm kicking around a few ideas. I'm writing some books right now, and they're really slow going because, man, writing a book is pretty tough. But I'm writing a couple smaller books right now instead of one big one, and I'm thinking I'm able to just grab a couple chapters out of that. Like, what do people really want to know about? Like, what Bigfoot is, like how to go Bigfooting, maybe Bigfoot's in other parts of the world, or probably not that one because they're all Portlanders here. Like, what do they want to hear about here? So I don't know. I'm trying to kick around, like, what in the world do these people want to know about? And then after I figure that, it's just a matter of piecing it together with stuff I have. So that's the fun part. But yeah. So anyway, I'm being very careful to not just regurgitate the same old stuff to the same crowd again. I haven't spoken at Hopsquatch since a year ago November, but a lot of the same people are going to be there. And I don't want to disappoint. This is a home game for me. I want to make sure that I come through.
Well, I can tell you that I was fascinated. I'm a Bigfoot nerd, so I was fascinated by your impression presentation, and I still it impacted me because of one of the photos that you showed of the Patterson Gimlin. I had never seen the angle of the foot. Like, the heel is actually in contact with the ground, and the toes are almost at a 90-degree angle up in the air. And I'd never had noticed that before. And the talk about how morphology of the foot and how the flexibility and all. But yeah, that is probably a little higher level than the general public would be. But you'd be surprised. I think people dig here, and but it definitely was a Bigfooter presentation. So.
Oh yeah, it's angled for the Bigfoot crowd.
Right.
And if you're gonna be a public speaker in any manner, whether it's speaking in front of an elementary school class like I did for 14 years, or speaking in front of a college class, which is what I sometimes do now when invited, you have to know your audience. Is the first rule of any public speaker's thing. You have to know your audience. And I know, like, when there's a smattering of children around and stuff mixed in with Bigfooters and their families and stuff, okay, that's a different presentation than a bunch of, like, field researchers or whatever out at the Olympic Project if I present at one of their expeditions. You got to know your audience. And I'm thinking, okay, this Hopsquatch, I think I know some families are coming. I know general aficionados are coming, people who don't get out in the field necessarily, but they like Bigfoot. And I know that the hardcore guys are going to be there too. And I shouldn't say guys, I mean women as well. I use guys as kind of a catch-all, and I guess that's a sexist thing on my part. I apologize. But some excellent researchers are showing up as well. So I want to make sure that I have something for everybody. Something for everybody. What can they do? So what can they get into? What can they relate to? What do they want to know? So I'm working on it. And, we've been talking about it for 6 minutes now. So it's going to be good because I've spent a lot of my time focused on this. Like, what am I going to talk about, And I've got some ideas.
All right,
I'm not going to spill the beans now, but, yeah.
Well, Cliff, we appreciate you sharing this time with us. And look forward to hearing back from you in the future. Shane and I are both shooting to be at your presentation on the 15th. So if you're in the Portland area or you want to fly into the Portland area just to see Cliff speak at Hopsquatch, no additional pressure, Cliff, on Friday, April 15th from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Quimby Lucky Lab in Portland. You can find out more at www.hopsquatch.com. Always a great event that Guy Edwards puts on in Portland. And I know that Cliff is also going to be at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. Go look that up on Facebook. Facebook, you can just search it on Google if you want. Mark Dorth always puts on a spectacular event in Ohio. And like Cliff said, tons of people. It's probably the largest Bigfooting event in the world. So get your tickets and get over there. Thanks again, Cliff, for joining us this evening. As always, thanks to my co-host and good friend, Shane Corson. This is Monster X Radio. We'll be back next weekend on Sunday with another Monster X Radio. For everybody that's listening, thanks again. We will talk to you next Sunday.